Today, I'm going to get real about porn and the effects of porn on young men today, because honestly, this is just something very, very personal to me. It's affecting so many young men I know, some of my closest friends, and we're living in a crisis right now. That's the only way to put it. We're living in a crisis for mental health and relationships, because nobody really talked about the full extent, the full detriment that porn is having on our minds, on our relationships. Some men are just no longer even able to interact with women on a normal level. They don't see women in a normal, healthy way anymore, and there's other factors at play, of course, but I can guarantee that porn is a massive factor in this. I've mentioned before on this channel that I'm 20. I finished school a few years ago, but as far back as I can remember, maybe like about I was 11 or 12 in secondary school, people were talking about porn. And the terrible thing is it's probably going on in primary schools as well. If you're not from the UK, primary school is aged like 5 to 11 or something, and then you move up to secondary school. But kids are just getting younger and younger and consuming porn for the first time, masturbating. We're being exposed to this stuff from a much younger age, but to the point, it was somehow so normal when I was younger to kind of have a favourite porn star. Just when we were young, like 11, 12, 13, we were talking about our favourite porn stars as if it were normal. Like, I think it must have been seen as some kind of act of maturity or something. People were really bragging about the porn they'd seen. It's crazy that this type of behaviour is normalised, and it's becoming even worse. Kids in primary schools are now consuming this stuff, this dirt, and that's just such a depressing reality. It's such a hard pill to swallow. So we saw it as this kind of act of maturity to have a favourite porn star, but once you really start to dig deep into the effect this stuff is having on your brain, you realise porn is actually the opposite of that. It's degrading your brain on a kind of a much deeper level than we realise. It's making your brain less mature. It's regressing it. It affects the part of your brain that controls impulses. It's literally degrading that part of your brain. You'll not be as disciplined going into adulthood. And it's so much worse when children are being exposed to this stuff, because their brains are still developing. But it's stuff like this that's just going to have dire consequences on society. Men, you cannot control impulses. How are we different from animals if we just act impulsively? And not only that, it's, as I mentioned earlier, it's just destroying so many relationships. Men nowadays, even men who are in relationships, who are by society's definition happy, they have everything, they have the status, the money, they have the woman of their dreams, yet they'll still choose to open up their laptop and masturbate to kind of increasingly extreme forms of pornography, just vile pornography. And that's because it's literally rewiring your pleasure centers. It's affecting the way dopamine hits our brain. It's rewiring that part of our brain. The way it's altering our brain, scientists are comparing it to substance abuse issues. We're becoming literal crackheads off of porn. And it's making so many other things in our life seem less enjoyable by comparison. It's literally reducing our capacity to feel happiness in everyday activities. But probably most significantly, as I said, we're now going out of our way to avoid our relationships, to avoid finding our significant others, because this is the effect it's having on us. It's damaging our dopamine reward systems. And what that does is it's making everyday activities that we would derive enjoyment from seem less enjoyable in comparison. It's literally making us more depressed, more anxious, more likely to kill ourselves. And that's the brutal truth about it. But as I mentioned earlier, probably the most significant thing is that men are no longer looking for their significant other. That was our purpose on a biological level. We're looking for that person to mate with, that person who we're going to raise a child with. But nowadays, more and more men are just turning into recluses. More and more children are kind of being raised on this stuff. They think that that's the right path to take. So going into their teens, into their adulthood, then they don't have the confidence in themselves. They don't have the confidence to talk to the opposite sex. They're instead of speaking to the girl who may or may not reject them, they have a million girls online, a million girls of all ethnicities that they can Google and relieve themselves to. It's instant gratification at its finest, but it's bad for us. It's bad for us. It's so bad for us. And another really, really hard pill to swallow is that I think that the reason certain forms of sexual violence are on the rise right now, I think that porn is a serious culprit for that, because the more porn we consume, this is what you have to realise, the more porn we consume, the more desensitized we become just to seeing sex. Which means that after that, some of us, I hope not all of us will do this, but again, like I've fallen victim to this type of thing. Like sometimes just seeing regular sex would not cut it for me when I was younger. I would I'm ashamed to say this, but I would search for kind of more extreme forms, more kind of toxic depictions of sex. And this is not what real sex is. But men are kind of having their brains rewired to think that this is normal, and there's some really, really fucked up stuff out there, and I really don't want to admit it, but I think some people will see this and kind of emulate this type of thing in real life. And I think that's just the main reason we need to start holding these porn companies accountable for what they're doing, for what they're putting out there. I mean, it's even for the people involved, it's just, the whole thing just seems exploitative. You hear stories of some of these girls who've been forced into porn. Like you can read some of the stories and stuff online, but it's absolutely horrific, some of the stuff that goes on in this industry. But I truly believe that nothing will happen. It's in our hands to stop consuming this type of content, to stop giving them an audience, because they aren't going to do anything about it. It's too lucrative. They aren't going to tone it down, because just more and more brainwashed, sick people are going to consume that content. It's horrible to think about, but it's true. It's making too much money. They have no incentive to stop. So how we can respond is to go on NoFap. And I know you'll probably hear this from a million other YouTubers, but this is the only viable solution in my opinion. You can go on no porn or whatever, you don't watch any porn whatsoever, but you're still masturbating, for me, and I know so many others, that's just not a viable solution, because porn and masturbation, they just go so hand in hand, they're so intertwined that I don't think they can ever fully be separated in the long term. So I think the solution is just to stop it all altogether. It's not giving you any benefit. I think the way to do it is to channel all those feelings of guilt, those feelings of frustration, depression. That's all this stuff leads to. All that stuff is just so interconnected. You can go and find out that the science shows that depression and anxiety levels are much higher in men that are consuming porn. So channel those negative emotions, and from that, forge your own willpower. Because it's up to you, it's up to us to stop consuming this evil content. It's in your hands. I hope I've been able to widen your perspective on this issue in some way. And I hope that more young men can make a change in this area.